Okay, so I do not know how to start this video. I don't know where to begin. I just feel like I want to just start and just kind of see where it goes, I think, because, I'm going to be talking about just the aging process and just my kind of thoughts and ideas about it and how I'm kind of approaching it and how I'm kind of, operating within it. I feel like we all have a different approach to the aging process. So this is just going to be a very conversational type of video, and I would really love to hear back from you guys because I feel like we all kind of learn from each other. I know that I have definitely learned from you. I feel like, there have been times where, you kind of hold a mirror up to me and you let me know that how I might be coming across, or affecting other people. And that is invaluable to me, honestly, it really is. I don't ever mean to offend anybody. My gosh, if I do offend somebody with something I say and you let me know in the comment section, it tears me apart. It really does. I hate thinking for a second that I have made somebody feel worse about themselves by something that I've said. So I do appreciate your feedback, always. However, I feel like whenever you are leaving comments and you might be leaving, constructive criticism, it's all about the delivery. Your delivery to me or anybody, anybody in your lives is going to determine how defensive or receptive they are to, whatever kind of advice or constructive criticism that you are giving. So it's all about actually being constructive if you are giving constructive criticism, because otherwise you're just hurling insults at somebody. And that has definitely happened to me before in my comment section, and that never feels good. And I don't feel receptive to it at all. Obviously, I'm just going to be defensive. So anyway, I definitely love hearing from you, and I know that you guys love hearing from each other, because I feel like, my comment section, gosh, I learned so much about so many things because of the comments that you take the time to leave. I feel like I need to start by saying that I'm 46 years old, especially if this is like one of the first videos that you're ever watching from me, because that definitely plays a role in how I am kind of viewing the whole aging process at this moment. So anyway, one of the reasons that I decided to make this video is because I tend to self-deprecate in my videos, and I get mixed reactions from that. I have a large portion of people saying that whenever I self-deprecate, that it makes me more relatable, and that they feel like, oh good, I'm so glad, finally somebody voiced something that I've always been thinking about, and it makes them feel not so alone in some of their ideas when it comes to, the physical changes especially that accompany, aging. And so I feel like there are a lot of people that kind of appreciate the fact that I do self-deprecate sometimes, and then I have the opposite reaction, which is people telling me, wow, you really need to practice more self-love, and you need to talk nicer to yourself or about yourself, or some people just might flat out say, wow, you're so insecure. And I feel like I definitely want to address that. I was thinking about it and I'm like, I'm not an insecure person. I get told that so often in my comment section that, I need to practice more self-love and that I'm so insecure. And then I start thinking, when I think about practicing self-love, yes, you're right. There's definitely some truth to the fact that I should probably speak a little bit kinder to myself sometimes. Sometimes it's just me being kind of self-aware, just very aware of certain things. Like, for instance, my hands. I have mentioned several times that I do not like my hands, that I have my grandma's hands, that I don't have, nice looking hands, and some of you have gotten after me for that. But in my mind, I'm thinking, I remember one time I was talking to my grandma, and I've said that I have my grandma's hands, and I remember one time I was like, I think it's so cool that you always have your nails painted. And her reaction was like, girl, look at my hands. And she's like, I have awful hands. I have to keep she has a very southern drawl. She's from Louisiana. She's like, I have to keep my fingernails painted, And in my mind, I never thought, wow, grandma, you need to practice more self-love and just really love your hands. I feel like she was just aware of it, I am very aware. I know what a beautiful pair of feminine hands look like, And because I see some women on YouTube, some people, I'm thinking of a couple people right now that are kind of in my age bracket, and they'll talk with their hands and stuff like that. And I see their hands, I think, God, they're so pretty, they're so feminine looking, and mine are just not. You know, I don't have a lot of body fat, so you can see my veins very clearly, you know, through my hands. I have bigger knuckles, but because I'm aware of that, it doesn't mean that I'm so insecure or that I'm gonna stop talking. I talk with my hands all the time. It doesn't hinder me. It doesn't make me go, oh, I should put my hands in my pocket. I'm gonna keep my arms folded. I'm gonna keep my hands behind my back. You know, it doesn't change the way that I behave. It's just me being aware of the fact that I don't have pretty female hands, you know, and that I feel like they look very aged. I feel like they look older than my face, you know. It's just kind of me letting you know that I'm very aware that I don't have, you know, very pretty hands. And I don't know why I feel the need to, you know, relay that information, but it's just kind of the type of person that I am. I don't know. Another thing that I have mentioned before are, you know, my eyelids, that they're sagging. I know at the beginning of a video recently, I'd said, I didn't have any makeup on because it was a get ready with me. And I'd said, oh my gosh, my eyes look so sad. You know, they look so sad without makeup. And that's just the reality. You know, now that I've aged, my eyes are starting to turn down. My eyelids are sitting on my eyelash line, and they appear to look more sad. I mean, that's just, like I said, it's just a reality. Does that mean that I'm gonna, you know, hide my face or want to go bury my face in the sand, you know, or I'm not going to carry myself with confidence when I leave this house and I go to the grocery store, I go interact with my children's teachers or, you know, stuff like that? Of course not. I'm aware that my eyes do kind of look a certain way, and I wish that they didn't. I'm aware that my temples are hollowing out, and I wish that they weren't. But does it make me an insecure person? It makes me, okay, so let me just put it to you this way. So my aging eyes compared to my eyes 6 years ago, I feel like it was about age 40 is when all this stuff started taking place. So it's only been within 6 years that I've seen my appearance make some pretty dramatic changes, you know? So if I had younger looking eyes, would I feel more secure? Sure, of course. Who wouldn't? Who would rather have, you know, loose skin sitting on their eyelash line and making their eyes look sad, or have, you know, youthful, tight, smooth looking eyelid skin? You know, everybody would rather have youthful looking eyes. So yes, having more youthful looking eyes would make me feel more secure. And I feel like I can achieve that, like with makeup. Like right now, I feel like it's a little less obvious that my eyes are so hooded and that the skin's loose, you know, more loose and saggy and stuff like that. But it doesn't make me operate in this world as an insecure person. I'm not somebody, I'm very social, I'm very talkative, I'm very, you know, outgoing. I interact with people quite often. I feel like I know like half the staff at my local grocery store. I'm always running into people. But when I think of practicing self-love, you know, I think there's so many other ways to practice self-love. Like for me, I practice self-love by eating right every single day. Like every single day I practice self-love by making healthier food choices as opposed to bad food choices, you know? Every day I practice self-love by, you know, exercising regularly. And these are things that my daughter is witnessing, you know, because sometimes people will say, wow, I feel so sorry for your daughter. I hope she doesn't take after you. And I was like, I hope she does. I hope she does in very many ways. I hope that she, you know, eats right. And I hope that she makes exercise a very big part of her life. I hope that she takes pride in her appearance, that, you know, she doesn't just leave the house completely disheveled and looking like she doesn't, you know, take any sort of pride in the way that she looks. You know, we're all able to put as little or as much effort into the one physical, you know, representation that we each possess, you know, and that's just the way that we look. And with that physical representation comes a ton of choices, and some of them are either choices that reflect some sort of self-love, and then there are other choices that don't reflect self-love. So when somebody leaves me a comment because I have said something a little self-deprecating, and then they say something like, I feel sorry for your daughter. You know, I'm sitting here saying, you shouldn't feel sorry for my daughter at all, because my daughter, at such a young age, she's already learned how to eat right. She's already learned to make exercise a very important part of her life. She and I exercise almost every single evening together. That is how much, you know, she knows that it's an important part of being kind of the best version of yourself. She's also very aware of the importance of sunscreen and the importance of taking care of your skin. So when anybody says that they feel sorry for my daughter, you know, that's really insulting to me. But I feel like one of the biggest misconceptions is that if you're not enthusiastic, or if you don't enjoy the physical changes that take place as part of the aging process, then you obviously don't have an appreciation for aging. And then I might get, you know, a comment in my comment section saying like, well, you should think of aging as a privilege. You know, some people don't have that privilege. And it always kind of surprises me a little bit, because for me, the alternative for not wanting to look old is not death. I mean, I'm not sitting here, I'm not so upset with the aging process that I'm sitting here saying, you know, I'd rather die. And I do understand that there are so many more significant aspects to the aging process that have nothing to do with the physical expression of it all. You know, I'm very aware of that. There's so many things that I love about aging. I love the fact that, you know, I feel like for most of us, it's a personal evolution, you know, of ourselves. I was reading an article not too long ago, and it was basically comparing this transition period that I feel like I'm in right now. I feel like it's in your 40s where you're kind of understanding that I'm no longer young, I'm not quite old yet, but I'm just in this transition period. And they made some comparisons to different phases in our lives, particularly middle school, where in middle school, that's when we start kind of seeing developmental changes take place, like physical changes take place. And we're kind of getting used to our new, you know, appearance. And then of course there's hormones and stuff that really start to take place in the way that we feel and the way that we behave and things of that nature. And then of course, that's kind of the age where we start to really kind of care about what other people think about us and how we behave, and you know, what other people's perception of us are, and where we kind of fit in, you know, in the world and in the big scheme of things, you know what I mean? And they've compared that to this stage that I feel like I'm in right now, which is this transition period where I'm no longer young, but I'm not quite old. And the comparison, I feel, was pretty spot on, you know, because I feel like I am in that stage where, you know, I'm recognizing a lot of physical changes that have taken place. And I'm trying to get used to seeing that in the mirror, because up until I was about 40, I feel like I kind of looked very similar. You know, every time I looked in the mirror, I definitely recognized myself, you know, and but it was after age 40 that I really started to see some pretty dramatic changes, you know. And then some days were better than others, and then they started, like the bad days started to be a little bit more common. But I think it was around age 40, and I'm 46 now, where I really started to notice some changes that, you know, were just kind of here to stay, you know what I mean? And so up until then, for, you know, 20 years before age 40, I felt like I was always looking at somebody in the mirror that was very familiar to me. And then after age 40, I started seeing somebody that looked a little bit less familiar. And then I started to realize that I needed to play around with makeup a little bit more in order to not look upset or not look sad, or you know, just bring some life back to my eyes and stuff like that. But I'm still having to transition and accept this new version of myself, you know. And then of course the hormones, you know, just like in middle school, at this age between our 40s and 50s, we start going through a lot of hormonal changes. And so, as most of you know, hormones plays a big role in the way that you feel from day to day. So I'm trying to adjust to those changes also, and then where you fit in, you know, in the world. I feel, you know, this is the hardest part. It's like, okay, so I'm having to think about things that I really never had to think about before. Well, not for the last 20 years anyway. It's like, how do I dress now? You know, what's appropriate? What do other people think is appropriate What do I think is appropriate? What makes me feel most confident, you know, when I'm wearing these things? There was a time I could walk into any store and I would just gravitate towards a certain look, you know, and those looks, I still see them in stores, but I can't gravitate to them anymore because I don't feel like it would flatter me. I mean, it's not that it wouldn't flatter me. It might flatter my body, but I don't think it would match up with my face. So right now I do feel like, you know, just like that article was making that comparison, I do feel like I'm trying to find my place now again in the world. Like, where do I fit in? You know, is it okay for me to be really bubbly and playful and silly at 46? You know what I mean? And it's not going to stop me from being that way inside of my house. You know, there was a time where I might be very playful or talkative or silly with, you know, a waiter or somebody in the service industry. And now at age 46, I feel that that would not be received the same way. You know, I feel like it might be a little creepy, and, you know, it might not come off right. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things where, just like in middle school, you're like, okay, how are other people perceiving me? Should it matter? You know, should I care how other people perceive me? I always will. I try to be very self-aware of my presence and the way that I might be affecting other people or coming off. And so, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with caring how other people perceive you, as long as you're not losing yourself and becoming what other people want you to be. But I definitely don't want people to feel uncomfortable around me, you know? But anyway, I just thought this article was just a very clever analogy, and I thought it was just it just gave me, you know, food for thought. So anyway, that is kind of where I stand, you know, with the whole aging process. I feel like I'm just kind of in a transition period, and I have not completely accepted it yet, and I'm still gonna fight it tooth and nail. As far as, you know, my appearance is concerned. Somebody left a comment one time, and it was a comment that was in response to somebody who was criticizing me for not being so enthusiastic about the physical changes that take place with the aging process. And she basically said, you can mourn the loss of youthful beauty and still appreciate the aging process. And that really, really resonated with me, because that pretty much summed up everything that I was trying to get across in a nutshell. And she just said it perfectly. So if you are the person who said that, thank you, because like I said, that really resonated with me. So anyway, I don't want to, you know, close this video on like a downer. I really want to reiterate something that I said earlier, which is that I do understand that there are so many beautiful, wonderful, significant aspects to the aging process that have nothing to do, you know, with the physical expression of it all. I think that there are developments within ourselves that may not have ever transpired had we not aged. You know, I think that that we gain a confidence and a self-awareness and, you know, self-knowledge that can only be born of experience. And all that experience is a result of, you know, having aged. I feel like as we age, I think that most of us become a lot more comfortable in our skin, that we really start to embrace those things that make us, you know, unique and, you know, just interesting. You know, I feel like for a long time, especially whenever I was younger, up until I was in my 30s or so, I was just very unsure of how I wanted to represent myself instead of just being myself, you know? And now I feel like I really am just being myself. I mean, there are certain occasions where it's hard to be yourself, especially when you're caught off guard or something like that, or, you know, or you don't know somebody very well. You might act a little bit differently, you know, obviously. You know, there was a time that I would have never been so quick to admit that I'm such a bargain shopper, you know, or that I'm really frugal and I really look for a sale and stuff like that. But at this age, you know, that's just who I am. That's always going to be who I am, no matter how much money I have. You know, obviously we are more established now than I was in my 20s and 30s. And I spend less money now on items and stuff like that just because I'm more comfortable with myself. I don't feel like I need to wear certain name brands and stuff like that. I just feel like as we get older, we just, you know, accept things about ourselves that might be a little bit different, you know, than everybody else. And then of course I think that as we get older, you know, we understand the preciousness of, you know, health and life and living and time, you know. I feel like time is more precious to us, so we really start to live in the moment and really appreciate, you know, the small things in life, you know. For me, it's not they're not small things, they're growing and growing every day, but those are my children. And I mean, I just appreciate every single phase of their lives. And, you know, that's just a part of aging and a part of being a mom, you know. Being a mom is the best thing that has ever happened to me when it comes to the aging process. And I know that becoming a grandma one day is going to be just as significant and bring me just as much joy as my children and raising my children and having a family and stuff like that. And, you know, again, those are things that could have never happened in my life had I not aged. So anyway, I think I made my point. You know, I may not love all the, you know, physical changes that take place, you know, with aging, you know, especially, you know, with the skin and the eyelids and the joints and stuff like that. But there are so many other aspects of the aging process that I am very enthusiastic about. And I definitely love aging, and I want to continue to age. I want to be over 100 one day. You know, sometimes my dad and I joke about, you know, just, you know, living till we're really, really old. My dad says that he wants to live till he's like 120, and I'm like, oh good. You know, we could just hang out together when I'm 100 and you're 120, because he's 20 years older than me. We'll just hang out together. By that time, people are probably gonna think we're like husband and wife or something if we're hanging out together, walking around, because we're gonna both be so old. It's weird. So thank you so much for watching. I would really love to, you know, hear your feedback. I would love to hear what you guys have to say, you know, about this topic. You know, how old are you? What your thoughts are about the aging process, how you feel, how you are, you know, kind of addressing it and stuff like that. I feel like your comments not only help me with the thoughts that are kind of floating around in my head, but I feel like they also help, you know, other viewers that are reading comments in the comment section. I feel like there's so much to learn in my comment section and even in other people's comment sections. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate you allowing me to, you know, just get some of these things off of my chest. And yeah, I will see you next week.